Yes, well, how can you do that if you're detached? Ah, you're thinking, Mitch. But detachment doesn't mean you don't let the experience penetrate you. On the contrary, you let it penetrate you fully. That's how you are able to leave it. I'm lost. Take any emotion, love for a woman, or grief for a loved one, or what I'm going through, fear and pain from a deadly illness. If you hold back on the emotions, if you don't allow yourself to go all the way through them, you can never get to being detached. You're too busy being afraid. You're afraid of the pain, you're afraid of the grief. You're afraid of the vulnerability that loving entails. But by throwing yourself into these emotions, by allowing yourself to dive in, all the way, over your head even, you experience them fully and completely. You know what pain is. You know what love is. You know what grief is. And only then can you say, all right. I have experienced that emotion. I recognize that emotion. Now I need to detach from that emotion for a moment. Morrie stopped and looked me over, perhaps to make sure I was getting this right. No, you think this is just about dying, he said. But it's like I keep telling you. When you learn how to die, you learn how to live. Morrie talked about his most fearful moments, when he felt his chest locked in heaving surges, or when he wasn't sure where his next breath would come from. These were horrifying times, he said, and his first emotions were horror, fear, anxiety. But once he recognized the feel of those emotions, their texture, their moisture, the shiver down the back, the quick flash of heat that crosses your brain, then he was able to say, okay, this is fear. Step away from it. Step away. I thought about how often this was needed in everyday life. How we feel lonely, sometimes to the point of tears, but we don't let those tears come because we are not supposed to cry. Or how we feel a surge of love for a partner, but we don't say anything because we're frozen with the fear of what those words might do to the relationship. Morrie's approach was exactly the opposite. Turn on the faucet. Wash yourself with the emotion. It won't hurt you. It will only help. If you let the fear inside, if you pull it on like a familiar shirt, then you can say to yourself, all right, it's just fear, I don't have to let it control me. I see it for what it is. Same for loneliness. You let go, let the tears flow, feel it completely, but eventually be able to say, all right, that was my moment with loneliness. I'm not afraid of feeling lonely, but now I'm going to put that loneliness aside and know that there are other emotions in the world, and I'm going to experience them as well. Detach, Morrie said again. He closed his eyes, then coughed. Then he coughed again, then he coughed again, more loudly. Suddenly, he was half choking, the congestion in his lungs seemingly teasing him, jumping halfway up, then dropping back down, stealing his breath. He was gagging, then hacking violently, and he shook his hands in front of him. With his eyes closed, shaking his hands, he appeared almost possessed, and I felt my forehead break into a sweat. I instinctively pulled him forward and slapped the back of his shoulders, and he pushed a tissue to his mouth and spit out a wad of phlegm. The coughing stopped, and Morrie dropped back into the foam pillows and sucked in air. You okay? You all right? I said, trying to hide my fear. I'm okay, Morrie whispered, raising a shaky finger. Just wait a minute. We sat there quietly until his breathing returned to normal. I felt the perspiration on my scalp. He asked me to close the window. The breeze was making him cold. I didn't mention that it was 80 degrees outside. Finally, in a whisper, he said, I know how I want to die. I waited in silence. I want to die serenely, peacefully. Not like what just happened. And this is where detachment comes in. If I die in the middle of a coughing spell like I just had, I need to be able to detach from the horror. I need to say, this is my moment. Don't want to leave the world in a state of fright. I want to know what's happening, accept it, get to a peaceful place, and let go. Do you understand? I nodded. Don't let go yet, I added quickly. Morrie forced a smile. No, not yet. We still have work to do. Do you believe in reincarnation? I ask. Perhaps. What would you come back as? If I had my choice, a gazelle. A gazelle? Yes, so graceful, so fast. A gazelle, Morrie smiles at me. You think that's strange? I study his shrunken frame, the loose clothes, the socks-wrapped feet that rest stiffly on foam rubber cushions, unable to move like a prisoner in leg irons. I picture a gazelle racing across the desert. No, I say. I don't think that's strange at all. The Professor, Part 2. The Morrie I knew, the Morrie so many others knew, would not have been the man he was without the years he spent working at a mental hospital just outside Washington, D.C., a place with the deceptively peaceful name of Chestnut Lodge. It was one of Morrie's first jobs after plowing through a master's degree and a Ph.D. from the University of Chicago. Having rejected medicine, law, and business, Morrie had decided the research world would be a place where he could contribute without exploiting others. Morrie was given a grant to observe mental patients and record their treatments. While the idea seems common today, it was groundbreaking in the early 50s. Morrie saw patients who would scream all day, patients who would cry all night, patients soiling their underwear, patients refusing to eat, having to be held down, medicated, fed intravenously. One of the patients, a middle-aged woman, came out of her room every day and lay face down on the tile floor, stayed there for hours as doctors and nurses stepped around her. Morrie watched in horror. He took notes, which is what he was there to do. Every day she did the same thing, came out in the morning, lay on the floor, stayed there until the evening talking to no one, ignored by everyone. It saddened Morrie. He began to sit on the floor with her, even lay down alongside her, trying to draw her out of her misery. Eventually, he got her to sit up and even to return to her room. What she mostly wanted, he learned, was the same thing many people want someone to notice she was there. Morrie worked at Chestnut Lodge for 5 years. Although it wasn't encouraged, he befriended some of the patients, including a woman who joked with him about how lucky she was to be there because my husband is rich so he can afford it. Can you imagine if I had to be in one of those cheap mental hospitals? Another woman, who would spit at everyone else, took to Morrie and called him her friend. They talked each day, and the staff was at least encouraged that someone had gotten through to her. But one day she ran away, and Morrie was asked to help bring her back. They tracked her down in a nearby store, hiding in the back, and when Morrie went in, she burned an angry look at him. "So you're one of them too," she snarled. "One of who?" "My jailers." Morrie observed that most of the patients there had been rejected and ignored in their lives, made to feel that they didn't exist. They also missed compassion, something the staff ran out of quickly. And many of these patients were well off, from rich families, so their wealth did not buy them happiness or contentment. It was a lesson he never forgot. I used to tease Morrie that he was stuck in the 60s. He would answer that the 60s weren't so bad compared to the times we lived in now. He came to Brandeis after his work in the mental health field, just before the 60s began. Within a few years, the campus became a hotbed for cultural revolution. Drugs, sex, race, Vietnam protests. Abby Hoffman attended Brandeis. So did Jerry Rubin and Angela Davis. Morrie had many of the radical students in his classes. That was partly because, instead of simply teaching, the sociology faculty got involved. It was fiercely anti-war, for example. When the professors learned that students who did not maintain a certain grade point average could lose their deferments and be drafted, they decided not to give any grades. When the administration said, "If you don't give these students grades, they will all fail," Morrie had a solution. "Let's give them all A's." And they did. Just as the 60s opened up the campus, it also opened up the staff in Morrie's department, from the jeans and sandals they now wore when working to their view of the classroom as a living, breathing place. They chose discussions over lectures, experience over theory. They sent students to the Deep South for civil rights projects and to the inner city for field work. They went to Washington for protest marches, and Morrie often rode the buses with his students. On one trip, he watched with gentle amusement as women in flowing skirts and love beads put flowers in soldiers' guns, then sat on the lawn, holding hands, trying to levitate the Pentagon. "They didn't move it," he later recalled, "but it was a nice try." O&E time, a group of black students took over Ford Hall on the BRANDEIS campus, draping it in a banner that read Malcolm X University. Ford Hall had chemistry labs, and some ADMINISDRATIONOFFICIALS worried that these radicals were making bombs in the basement. Morrie knew better. He saw right to the core of the problem, which was human beings wanting to feel that they mattered. The standoff lasted for weeks, and it might have gone on even longer if Morrie hadn't been walking by the building when one of the protesters recognized him as a favorite teacher and yelled for him TOCOME in through the window. An hour later, Morrie crawled out through the window with a list of what the protesters wanted. He took the list to the university president, and the situation was diffused. Morrie always made good peace. At BRANDEIS, he taught classes about social psychology, mental illness and health, group process. They were light on what you now call career skills and heavy on personal development. A&D, because of this, business and law students today might look at Morrie as foolishly naive about his contributions. How much money did his students go on to make? How many big-time cases did THEYWAN? THEN again, how many business or law students ever visit their old professors once they leave? morrie test students did that all the time. And in his final months, they came back to him, hundreds of them from Boston, New York, California, London, and Switzerland, from corporate offices and inner-city school programs. They called. They wrote. They drove hundreds of miles for a visit, a word, a smile. "Never had another teacher like you," they all said. As my visits with morrie go on, I begin to read about death, how different cultures view the final passage. There is a tribe in the North American Arctic, for example, who believe that all things on EARTHHAVE a soul that exists in a miniature form of the body that holds it, so that a deer has a tiny deer inside it, and a man has a tiny man inside him. When the large being dies, that tiny form lives on. It can slideinto something being born nearby, or it can go to a temporary resting place in the sky, in the belly of a great feminine spirit, where it waits until the moon can send it back to Earth. Sometimes, they say, the moon is so busy with the new souls of the world that it disappears from the sky. That is why we have moonless nights. But in the end, the moon always returns, as do we all. That is what they believe. The 7th Tuesday, we talk about the fear ofaging morrie lost his battle. Someone was now wiping his behind. He faced this with typically brave acceptance. No longer able to reach behind him when he used the commode, he informed CONNIE of his latest limitation. "Would you be embarrassed to do it for ME?" SHE said no. I found it typical that he asked her first. It took some getting used to, morrie admitted, because it was, in a way, complete surrender to the disease. The most personal and basic things had now been taken from him going to the bathroom. Wiping his nose, washing his private parts. With the exception of breathing and swallowing his food, he was dependent on others for nearly everything. I asked morrie how he managed to stay positive through that. "MITCH, it's funny," he said. "I'm an independent person, so my inclination was to fight all of this being helped from the car, having someone else dress me. I felt a little ashamed, because our culture tells USWE should be ashamed if we can't wipe our own behind. But then I figured, forget what the culture says. I have ignored the culture much of my life. I am not going to be ashamed. What's the big deal? And you know what? The strangest thing. What's THAT? I began to enjoy my dependency. Now I enjoy when they turn me over on my side and rub cream on my behind so I don't get sores, or when they wipe my brow or they massage my legs. I revel in it. I see LOSMY eyes and soak it up, and it seems very familiar to me. I test like going back to being a child again. Someone to bathe you, someone to lift you, someone to wipe you. We all know how to be a child. It's inside all of us. For me, it's just remembering how to enjoy. Truth is, when our mothers held us, rocked us, stroked our heads, none of us ever got enough of that. We all yearn in some way to return to those days when we were completely taken care of, unconditional love, unconditional attention. Most of us didn't get enough. No, I didn't. I looked at morrie, and I suddenly knew why he so enjoyed my leaning over and adjusting his microphone, or fussing with the pillows, or wiping his eyes. Human touch. At 78, he was giving as ANADULT and taking as a child. Later that day, we talked about aging. Or maybe one should say the fear of aging, another of the issues on my what's bugging my generation list. On my ride from the Boston airport, I had counted THEBILLBOARDS that featured young and beautiful people. There was a handsome young man in a cowboy hat, smoking a cigarette, two beautiful young women smiling over a shampoo bottle, a SULTRYLOOKINGTNA, GER with her jeans UNSNAPPED, and a sexy woman in a black velvet dress, next to a man in a tuxedo, the two of them snuggling a glass of scotch. Not once did I see anyone who would pass for over 35. I told morrie I was already feeling over the hill, much as I tried desperately to stay on top of it. I worked out constantly, watched what I ate, checked my hairline in the mirror. I had gone from being proud to say my age, because of all I had done so young, to not bringing it up, for fear I was getting too close to 40 and therefore PROFESSIONALOBLIVION. morrie had aging in better perspective. "This emphasis on youth, I don't buy it," he said. "Listen, I know what a misery being young can be, so don't tell me it's so great. All these kids who came to me with their struggles, their strife, THERFELINGS of inadequacy, their sense that life was miserable, so bad they wanted to kill themselves. In addition to all the miseries, the young are not wise. They have very little understanding about life. Who wants to live every day when you don't know what's going on? When people are manipulatingyo, telling you to buy this perfume and you'll be beautiful, or this pair of jeans and you'll be sexy, and you believe them. It's such nonsense. T, you ever afraid to grow old? I asked. Mitch, I embrace aging. Embrace it. It quotes very simple. As you grow, you learn more. If you stayed at 22, you'd always be as ignorant as you were at 22. Aging is not just decay, it's growth. It's more than the negativity you're going to die. It's also the positive that you understand you're going to die, and that you live a better life because of it. Why, yes, I said, but if aging were so valuable, why do people always say, oh, if I were young again? You never hear people say, I wish I were 65. He smiled. You know what that reflects? Unsatisfied lives, unfulfilled lives, lives that haven't found meaning. Because if you found meaning in your life, you don't want to go back. You want to GOFORWARD. You want to see more, do more. You can't wait until 65. Listen, you should know something. All younger people should know something. If you're always battling against getting older, why are you going to be unhappy because it will happen anyhow? Mitch. He lowered his voice. Fact is, you are going to die eventually. I nodded. It won't matter what you tell yourself. I know, but hopefully, he said. Not for a long, long time. He closed his eyes with a peaceful look, then asked me to adjust the pillows behind his head. His body needed constant adjustment to stay comfortable. It was propped in the chair with white pillows, yellow foam, and blue towels. At a quick glance, it seemed as if morrie were being packed for shipping. THANKU, he whispered as I moved the pillows. No problem, I said. MITCH, what are you THINKING? I paused before answering. Okay, I said, I'm wondering how you don't envy younger, healthy people. I guess I do. He closed his eyes. I envy them being able to go to the health club or go for a swim or dance. Mostly for dancing. But envy comes to me, I feel it, and then I let it go. Remember what I said about detachment. Let it go. Tell yourself, that's envy, I'm going to separate from it now. And walk away. Ichi coughed a long, scratchy cough, and he pushed a tissue to his mouth and spit weakly into it. Sitting there, I felt so much stronger than he, ridiculously so, as if I could lift him and toss him over MYSHOULDER like a sack of flour. I was embarrassed by this superiority because I did not feel superior to him in any other way. How do you keep from envying? WHAT? MEHE smiled. Mitch, it is impossible for the old not to envy the young. But the issue is to accept who you are and revel in that. This is your time to be in your 30s. I had my time to be in my 30s, and now is my time to be 78. You have to find what's good and true and beautiful in your life as it is now. Looking back makes you competitive, and age is not a competitive issue. He exhaled and lowered his eyes, as if to watch his breath scatter into the air. Truth is, part of me is every age. I'm a 3-year-old, I'm a 5-year-old, I'm a 37-year-old, I'm a 50-year-old. I've been through all of them, and I know what it's like. I delight in being a child when it's appropriate to be a child. I delight in being a wise old man when it's appropriate to be a wise old man. Think of all I can be. I am every age up to my own. Do you understand? I nodded. How can I be envious of where you are when I've been there myself? Fate succumbs many a species. One alone jeopardizes itself. HAUDEN, MORRIE's favorite, poet. The 8th Tuesday we talk about money. I held up the newspaper so that Morrie could see it. I don't want my tombstone to READI never owned a network. Morrie laughed, then shook his head. The morning sun was coming through the window behind him, falling on the pink flowers of the hibiscus plant that sat on the sill. The quote was from Ted Turner, the billionaire media mogul, founder of CNN, who had been lamenting his inability to snatch up the CBS network in a corporate megadeal. I had brought the story to Morrie this morning because I wondered if Turner ever found himself in my old professor's position, his breath disappearing, his body turning to stone, his days being crossed off the calendar one by one. Would he really be crying over owning a network? It's all part of the same problem, Mitch, Morrie said. We put our values in the wrong things, and it leads to very disillusioned lives. I think we should talk about that. Morrie was focused. There were good days and bad days now. He was having a good day. The night before, he had been entertained by a local a cappella group that had come to the house to perform, and he relayed the story excitedly, as if the ink spots themselves had dropped by for a visit. Morrie's love for music was strong even before he got sick, but now it was so intense, it moved him to tears. Hugh'd listen to opera sometimes at night, closing his eyes, riding along with the magnificent voices as they dipped and soared. You should have heard this group last night, Mitch. Such a sound. Morrie had always been taken with simple pleasures, singing, laughing, dancing. Now, more than ever, material things held little or no significance. When people die, you always hear the expression, "You can't take it with you." Morrie seemed to know that a long time ago. We've got a form of brainwashing going on in our country, Morrie sighed. Do you know how they brainwash people? They repeat something over and over. And that's what we do in this country. Owning things is good. More money is good. More property is good. More commercialism is good. More is good. More is good. We repeat it and have it repeated to us over and over until nobody bothers to even think otherwise. The average person is so fogged up by all this, he has no perspective on what's really important anymore. Wherever I went in my life, I met people wanting to gobble up something new. Gobble up a new car, gobble up a new piece of property, gobble up the latest toy. And then they wanted to tell you about it. What I got. Guess what I got? You know how I always interpreted that. These were people so hungry for love that they were accepting substitutes. They were embracing material things and expecting a sort of hug back. But it never works. You can't substitute material things for love or for gentleness or for tenderness or for a sense of comradeship. Money is not a substitute for tenderness, and power is not a substitute for tenderness. I can tell you as I'm sitting here dying, when you most need it, neither money nor power will give you the feeling you are looking for, no matter how much of them you have. I glanced around Morrie's study. It was the same today as it had been the first day I arrived. The books held their same places on the shelves. The papers cluttered the same old desk. The outside room shed not been improved or upgraded. In fact, Morrie really hadn't bought anything new except medical equipment in a long, long time, maybe years. The day he learned that he was terminally ill was the day he lost interest in his purchasing power. So the TV was the same old model. The car that Charlotte drove was the same old model. The dishes and the silverware and the towels, all the same. And yet the house had changed so drastically. It had filled with love and teaching and communication. It had filled with friendship and family and honesty and tears. It had filled with colleagues and students and meditation teachers and therapists and nurse and a cappella groups. It had become, in a very real way, a wealthy home, even though Morrie's bank account was rapidly depleting. There's a big confusion in this country over what we want versus what we need, Morrie said. You need food. You want a chocolate sundae. You have to be honest with yourself. You don't need the latest sports car. You don't need the biggest house. Truth is, you don't get satisfaction from those things. You know what really gives you satisfaction? What? Offering others what you have to give. You sound like a Boy Scout. I don't mean money, Mitch. I mean your time, your concern, your storytelling. It's not so hard. There's a senior center that opened near here. Dozens of elderly people come there every day. If you're a young man or young woman and you have a skill, you are asked to come and teach it. Say you know computers. You come there and teach them computers. You are very welcome there, and they are very grateful. This is how you start to get respect, by offering something that you have. There are plenty of places to do this. You don't need to have a big talent. There are lonely people in hospitals and shelters who only want some companionship. You play cards with a lonely older man and you find new respect for yourself because you are needed. Remember what I said about finding a meaningful life. I wrote it down, but now I can recite it. Devote yourself to loving others, devote yourself to your community around you, and devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. You notice, he added, grinning. There's nothing in there about a salary. I jotted some of the things Morrie was saying on a yellow pad. I did this mostly because I didn't want him to see my eyes, to know what I was thinking, that I had been, for much of my life since graduation. Pursuing these very things, he had been railing against bigger toys, nicer house. Because I worked among rich and famous athletes, I convinced myself that my needs were realistic, my greeting consequential compared to theirs. This was a smokescreen. Morrie made that obvious. Mitch, if you're trying to show off for people at the top, forget it. They will look down at you anyhow. And if you're trying to show off for people at the bottom, forget it. They will only envy you. Status will get you nowhere. Only an open heart will allow you to float equally between everyone. He paused, then looked at me. I'm dying, right? Yes. Why do you think it's so important for me to hear other people's problems? Don't I have enough pain and suffering of my own? Of course I do. But giving to other people is what makes me feel alive. Not my car or my house. Not what I look like in the mirror. When I give my time, when I can make someone smile after they were feeling sad, it's as close to healthy as I ever feel. Do the kinds of things that come from the heart. When you do, you won't be dissatisfied, you won't be envious, you won't be longing for somebody else's things. On the contrary, you'll be overwhelmed with what comes back. He coughed and reached for the small bell that lay on the chair. He had to poke a few times at it, and I finally picked it up and put it in his hand. "Thank you," he whispered. He shook it weakly, trying to get Connie's attention. "Ted Turner guy," Morrie said. "He couldn't think of anything else for his tombstone. Each night, when I go to sleep, I die. And the next morning, when I wake up, I am reborn." Mahatma Gandhi, the 9th Tuesday, we talk about how love goes on the leaves had begun to change color, turning the ride through West Newton into a portrait of gold and rust. Back in Detroit, the labor war had stagnated, with each side accusing the other of failing to communicate. The stories on the TV news were just as depressing. In rural Kentucky, 3 men threw pieces of a tombstone off a bridge, smashing the windshield of a passing car, killing a teenage girl who was traveling with her family on a religious pilgrimage. In California, the O.J. Simpson trial was heading toward a conclusion, and the whole country seemed to be obsessed. Even in airports, there were hanging TV sets tuned to CNN so that you could get an O.J. update as you made your way to a gate. I had tried calling my brother in Spain several times. I left messages saying that I really wanted to talk to him, that I had been doing a lot of thinking about us. A few weeks later, I got back a short message saying everything was okay, but he was sorry. He really didn't feel like talking about being sick. For my old professor, it was not the talk of being sick, but the being sick itself that was sinking him. Since my last visit, a nurse had inserted a catheter into his penis, which drew the urine out through a tubing into a bag that sat at the foot of his chair. His legs needed constant tending. He could still feel pain, even though he could not move them, another one of ALS's cruel little ironies. And unless his feet dangled just the right number of inches off the foam pads, it felt as if someone were poking him with a fork. In the middle of conversations, Morrie would have to ask visitors to lift his foot and move it just an inch, or to adjust his head so that it fit more easily into the palm of the colored pillows. Can you imagine being unable to move your own head? With each visit, Morrie seemed to be melting into his chair, his spine taking on its shape. Still, every morning he insisted on being lifted from his bed and wheeled to his study, deposited there among his books and papers and the hibiscus plant on the windowsill. In typical fashion, he found something philosophical in this. "I sum it up in my newest aphorism," he said. "Let me hear it. When you're in bed, you're dead." He smiled. Only Morrie could smile at something like that. He had been getting calls from the Nightline people and from Ted Capel himself. "They want to come and do another show with me," he said. "But they say they want to wait. Until what? You're on your last breath. Maybe, anyhow, I'm not so far away." "Don't say that. I'm sorry. That bugs me that they want to wait until you wither. It bugs you because you look out for me." He smiled. "Mitch, maybe they are using me for a little drama. That's okay. Maybe I'm using them too. They help me get my message to millions of people. I couldn't do that without them, right? So it's a compromise." He coughed, which turned into a long drawn-out gargle, ending with another glob into a crushed tissue. "Anyhow," Morrie said, "I told them they better not wait too long because my voice won't be there. Once this thing hits my lungs, talking may become impossible. I can't speak for too long without needing a rest now. I have already canceled a lot of the people who want to see me. Mitch, there are so many. But I'm too fatigued. If I can't give them the right attention, I can't help them." I looked at the tape recorder, feeling guilty, as if I were stealing what was left of his precious speaking time. "Should Wes skip it?" I asked. "Will it make you too tired?" Morrie shut his eyes and shook his head. He seemed to be waiting for some silent pain to pass. "No," he finally said. "You and I have to go on. This is our last thesis together, you know. Our last thesis. We want to get it right." I thought about our first thesis together in college. It was Morrie's idea, of course. He told me I was good enough to write an honors project, something I had never considered. Now here we were, doing the same thing once more, starting with an idea. Dying man talks to living man, tells him what he should know. This time, I was in less of a hurry to finish. "Someone asked me an interesting question yesterday," Morrie said now, looking over my shoulder at the wall hanging behind me, a quilt of hopeful messages that friends had stitched for him on his 70th birthday. Each patch on the quilt had a different message. Stay the course, the best is yet to be, morrie always no one in mental health? Was the question I asked. If I worried about being forgotten after I died. Well, do you? I don't think I will be. I've got so many people who have been involved with me in close, intimate ways. And love is how you stay alive even after you are gone. Sounds like a song lyric, love is how you stay alive. Morrie chuckled. Maybe, but Mitch, all this talk that we're doing, do you ever hear my voice sometimes when you're back home? When you're all alone, maybe on the plane, maybe in your car? Yes, I admitted. Then you will not forget me after I'm gone. Think of my voice and I'll be there. Think of your voice. And if you want to cry a little, it's okay. Morrie, he had wanted to make me cry since I was a freshman. One of these days I'm gonna get to you, he would say. Yeah, I would answer. I decided what I wanted on my tombstone, he said. I don't want to hear about tombstones. Why, they make you nervous, I shrugged. We can forget it. No, go ahead. What did you decide? Morrie popped his lips. I was thinking of this, a teacher to the last. He waited while I absorbed it, a teacher to the last. Good, he said. Yes, I said. Very good. I came to love the way Morrie lit up when I entered the room. He did this for many people, I know, but it was his special talent to make each visitor feel that the smile was unique. Ah, it's my buddy, he would say when he saw me, in that foggy, high-pitched voice. And it didn't stop with the greeting. When Morrie was with you, he was really with you. He looked you straight in the eye, and he listened as if you were the only person in the world. How much better would people get along if their first encounter each day were like this, instead of a grumble from a waitress or a bus driver or a boss? I believe in being fully present, Morrie said. That means you should be with the person you're with. When I'm talking to you now, Mitch, I try to keep focused only on what is going on between us. I am not thinking about something we said last week. I am not thinking of what's coming up this Friday. I am not thinking about doing another Capel show or about what medications I'm taking. I am talking to you. I am thinking about you. I remembered how he used to teach this idea in the group process class back at Brandeis. I had scoffed back then, thinking this was hardly a lesson plan for a university course. Learning to pay attention, how important could that be? I now know it is more important than almost everything they taught us in college. Morrie motioned for my hand, and as I gave it to him, I felt a surge of guilt. Here was a man who, if he wanted, could spend every waking moment in self-pity, feeling his body for decay, counting his breaths. So many people with far smaller problems are so self-absorbed, their eyes glaze over if you speak for more than 30 seconds. They already have something else in mind, a friend to call, a fax to send, a lover they're daydreaming about. They only snap back to full attention when you finish talking, at which point they say uh-huh or yeah, really, and fake their way back to the moment. Part of the problem, Mitch, is that everyone is in such a hurry, Morrie said. People haven't found meaning in their lives, so they're running all the time looking for it. They think the next car, the next house, the next job. Then they find those things are empty, too, and they keep running. Once you start running, I said, it's hard to slow yourself down. So hard, he said, shaking his head. Do you know what I do? When someone wants to get ahead of me in traffic, when I used to be able to drive, I would raise my hand. Tried to do this now, but the hand lifted weakly, only 6 inches. I would raise my hand as if I was going to make a negative gesture, and then I would wave and smile. Instead of giving them the finger, you let them go and you smile. You know what? A lot of times they smiled back. The truth is, I don't have to be in that much of a hurry with my car. I would rather put my energies into people. He did this better than anyone I'd ever known. Those who sat with him saw his eyes go moist when they spoke about something horrible, or crinkle in delight when they told him a really bad joke. He was always ready to openly display the emotion so often missing from my baby boomer generation. We are great at small talk. What do you do? Where do you live? But really listening to someone without trying to sell them something, pick them up, recruit them, or get some kind of status in return, how often do we get this anymore? I believe many visitors in the last few months of Morrie's life were drawn not because of the attention they wanted to pay to him, but because of the attention he paid to them. Despite his personal pain and decay, this little old man listened the way they always wanted someone to listen. I told him he was the father everyone wishes they had. Well, he said, closing his eyes, I have some experience in that area. The last time Morrie saw his own father was in a city morgue. Charlie Schwartz was a quiet man who liked to read his newspaper, alone, under a street lamp on Tremont Avenue in the Bronx. Every night, when Morrie was little, Charlie would go for a walk after dinner. He was a small Russian man with a ruddy complexion and a full head of grayish hair. Morrie and his brother, David, would look out the window and see him leaning against the lamppost, and Morrie wished he would come inside and talk to them, but he rarely did. Nor did he tuck them in, nor kiss them good night. Morrie always swore he would do these things for his own children if he ever had any. And years later, when he had them, he did. Meanwhile, as Morrie raised his own children, Charlie was still living in the Bronx. He still took that walk. He still read the paper. One night he went outside after dinner. A few blocks from home, he was accosted by two robbers. "Give us your money," one said, pulling a gun. Frightened, Charlie threw down his wallet and began to run. He ran through the streets and kept running until he reached the steps of a relative's house, where he collapsed on the porch, heart attack. He died that night. Morrie was called to identify the body. He flew to New York and went to the morgue. He was taken downstairs to the cold room where the corpses were kept. "Is this your father?" the attendant asked. Morrie looked at the body behind the glass, the body of the man who had scolded him and molded him and taught him to work, who had been quiet when Morrie wanted him to speak, who had told Morrie to swallow his memories of his mother when he wanted to share them with the world. He nodded and he walked away. The horror of the room, he would later say, sucked all other functions out of him. He did not cry until days later. Still, his father's death helped prepare Morrie for his own. This much he knew. There would be lots of holding and kissing and talking and laughter and no goodbyes left unsaid, all the things he missed with Hi's father and his mother. When the final moment came, Morrie wanted his loved ones around him, knowing what was happening. No one would get a phone call or a telegram or have to look through a glass window in some cold and foreign basement. In the South American rainforest, there is a tribe called the Dasana, who see the world as a fixed quantity of energy that flows between all creatures. Every birth must therefore engender a death, and every death bring forth another birth. This way, the energy of the world remains complete. When they hunt for food, the Dasana know that the animals they kill will leave a hole in the spiritual well. But that hole will be filled, they believe, by the souls of the Dasana hunters when they die. Where there are no men dying, there would be no birds or fish being born. I like this idea. Morrie likes it too. The closer he gets to goodbye, the more he seems to feel we are all creatures in the same forest. What we take, we must replenish. It's only fair, he says. The 10th Tuesday we talk about marriage, I brought a visitor to meet Morrie. My wife. He had been asking me since the first day I came. "When do I meet Janine? When are you bringing her?" I'd always had excuses until a few days earlier when I called his house to see how he was doing. It took a while for Morrie to get to the receiver. And when he did, I could hear the fumbling as someone held it to his ear. He could no longer lift a phone by himself. He gasped. "You doing okay, coach?" I heard him exhale. "Mitch, your coach, isn't having such a great day. Sleeping time was getting worse. He needed oxygen almost nightly now, and his coughing spells had become frightening. One cough could last an hour, and he never knew if he'd be able to stop. He always said he would die when the disease got his lungs. I shuddered when I thought how close death was. "I'll see you on Tuesday," I said. "You'll have a better day then." "Mitch, yeah, is your wife there with you?" She was sitting next to me. Put her on. I want to hear her voice. Now I am married to a woman blessed with far more intuitive kindness than one. Although she had never met Morrie, she took the phone. I would have shaken my head and whispered, "I'm not here, I'm Nother." And in a minute, she was connecting with my old professor as if they'd known each other since college. I sensed this, even though all I heard on my end was a huh. "Mitch told me." "Oh, thank." When she hung up, she said, "I'm coming next trip." And that was that. Now we sat in his office, surrounding him in his recliner. Morrie, by his own admission, was a harmless flirt, and while he often had to stop for coughing or to use the commode, he seemed to find new reserves of energy with Janine in the room. He looked at photos from our wedding, which Janine had brought along. "You are from Detroit," Morrie said. "Yes," Janine said. "I taught in Detroit for 1 year in the late 40s. I remember a funny story about that." He stopped to blow his nose. When he fumbled with the tissue, I held it in place and he blew weakly into it. I squeezed it lightly against his nostrils, then pulled it off, like a mother does to a child in a car seat. "Thank you, Mitch." He looked at Janine. "My helper, this one is." Janine smiled. "Anyhow, my story. There were a bunch of sociologists at the university, and we used to play poker with other staff members, including this guy who was a surgeon. One night after the game, he said, "Morrie, I want to come see you work." I said, "Fine." So he came to one of my classes and watched me teach. After the class was over, he said, "All right, now, how would you like to see me work? I have an operation tonight." I wanted to return the favor, so I said okay. He took me up to the hospital. He said, "Scrub down, put on a mask, and get into a gown." And next thing I knew, I was right next to him at the operating table. There was this woman, the patient, unthettable, naked from the waist down, and he took a knife and went zip just like that. Well, Morrie lifted a finger and spun it around. I started to go like this. I'm about to faint. All the blood. Yuck. The nurse next to me said, "What's the matter, doctor?" And I said, "I'm no damn doctor. Get me out of here." We laughed, and Morrie laughed too, as hard as he could, with his limited breathing. It was the first time in weeks that I could recall him telling a story like this. How strange, I thought, that he nearly fainted once from watching someone else's illness, and now he was so able to endure his own. Connie knocked on the door and said that Morrie's lunch was ready. It was not the carrot soup and vegetable cakes and Greek pasta I had brought that morning from Bread and Circus. Although I tried Tabai, the softest of foods now, they were still beyond Morrie's limited strength to chew and swallow. He was eating mostly liquid supplements, with perhaps a bran muffin tossed in until it was mushy and easily digested. Charlotte would puree almost everything in a blender now. He was taking food through a straw. I still shopped every week and walked in with bags to show him, but it was more for the look in his face than anything else. When I opened the refrigerator, I would see an overflow of containers. I guess I was hoping that one day we would go back to eating a real lunch together and I could watch the sloppy way in which he talked while chewing, the food spilling happily out of his mouth. This was a foolish hope. "So, Janine," Morrie said. She smiled. "You are lovely. Give me your hand." She did. "Mitch says that you're a professional singer." "Yes," Janine said. "He says you're great." "Oh," she laughed. N0. He just says that." Morrie raised his eyebrows. "Will you sing something for me?" Now, I have heard people ask this of Janine for almost as long as I have known her. When people find out you sing for a living, they always say, "Sing something for us." Shy about her talent and a perfectionist about conditions, Janine never did. She would politely decline, which is what I expected now. Which is when she began T0 sing. "The very thought of you and I forget to do little ordinary things that everyone ought to do." It was a 1930s standard, written by Ray Noble, and Janine sang it sweetly, looking straight at Morrie. I was amazed, once again, at his ability T0 draw emotion from people who otherwise kept it locked away. Morrie closed his eyes to absorb the notes. As my wife's loving voice filled the room, a crescent smile appeared zero in his face. And while his body was stiff as a sandbag, you could almost see him dancing inside it. See your face in every flower, your eyes in stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my love. When she finished, Morrie opened his eyes and tears rolled down his cheeks. In all the years I have listened to my wife sing, I never heard her the way he did at that moment. Marriage. Almost everyone I knew had a problem with it. Some had problems getting into it. Some had problems getting out. My generation seemed T0 struggle with the commitment, as if it were an alligator from some murky swamp. I had gotten used to attending weddings, congratulating the couple, and feeling only mild surprise when I saw the groom a few years later sitting in a restaurant with a younger woman whom he introduced as a friend. "You know, I'm separated from so-and-so," he would say. Why do we have such problems? I asked Morrie about this. Having waited 7 years before I proposed T0 Janine, I wondered if people my age were being more careful than those who came before us. 0 are simply more selfish. "Well, I feel sorry for your generation," Morrie said. "In this culture, it's so important to find a loving relationship with someone because so much of the culture does not give you that. But the poor kids today, either they're too selfish to take part in a real loving relationship, or they rush into marriage and then 6 months later they get divorced. They don't know what they want in a partner. They don't know Hothier themselves, so how can they know who they're marrying?" He sighed. Morrie had counseled so many unhappy lovers in his years as a professor. It's sad because a loved one is so important. You realize that, especially when you're in a time like I am, when you're not doing so well. Friends are great, but friends are not going to be here on a night when you're coughing and can't sleep and someone has to sit up all night with you, comfort you, try to be helpful. Charlotte and Morrie, who met as students, had been married 44 years. I watched them together now, when she would remind him of his medication, or come in and stroke his neck, or talk about one of their sons. They worked as a team, often needing no more than a silent glance to understand what the other was thinking. Charlotte was a private person, different from Morrie, but I knew how much he respected her, because sometimes when we spoke, he would say, "Charlotte might be uncomfortable with me revealing that," and he would end the conversation. It was the only time Morrie held anything back. Learned this much about marriage, he said now. You get tested. You find out who you are, who the other person is, and how you accommodate or don't. Is there some kind of rule to know if a marriage is going to work? Morrie smiled. Things are not that simple, Mitch. I know. Still, he said, there are a few rules I know to be true about love and marriage. If you don't respect the other person, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. If you don't know how to compromise, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. If you can't talk openly about what goes on between you, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. And if you don't have a common set of values in life, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. Your values must be alike. And the biggest one of those values, Mitch, yes, your belief in the importance of your marriage. He sniffed, then closed his eyes for a moment. Personally, he sighed, his eyes still closed, I think marriage is a very important thing to do, and you're missing a hell of a lot if you don't try it. He ended the subject by quoting the poem he believed in like a prayer. Love each other or perish. Okay, question, I say to Morrie. His bony fingers hold his glasses across his chest, which rises and falls with each labored breath. What's the question? Lai says, remember the book of Job, from the Bible? Right, Job is a good mare, but God makes him suffer to test his faith. One, remember. Takes away everything Lai has, his house, his money, his family. Health makes him sick. To test his faith. Right, to test his faith. So I'm wondering, what are you wondering? What you think about that? Morrie coughs violently. His hands quiver as he drops them by his side. I think, he says, smiling, God overdid it. The 11th Tuesday we talk about our culture hit him harder. I slapped Morrie's back. Harder. I slapped him again. Near his shoulders, now down lower. Morrie, dressed in pajama bottoms, lay in bed on his side, his head flush against the pillow, his mouth open. The physical therapist was showing me how to bang loose the poison in his lungs, which Henny had done regularly now to keep it from solidifying, to keep him breathing. Always knew you wanted to hit me. Morrie gasped. Yeah, I joked as I wrapped my fist against the alabaster skin of his back. This is for that bee you gave me sophomore year. Whack, we all laughed, a nervous laughter that comes when the devil is within earshot. It would have been cute, this little scene, were it not what we all knew it was, the final calisthenics before death. Morris Diceace was now dangerously close to his surrender spot, his lungs. He had been predicting he would die from choking, and I could not imagine a more terrible way to go. Sometimes he would close his eyes and try to draw the air up into his mouth and nostrils, and it seemed as if he were trying to lift an anchor. Outside, it was jacket weather, early October, the leaves clumped in piles on the lawns around West Newton. Morrie's physical therapist had come earlier in the day, and I usually excused myself when nurses or specialists had business with him. But as the weeks passed and our time ran down, I was increasingly less self-conscious about the physical embarrassment. I wanted to be there. I wanted to observe everything. This was not like me. But then, neither were a lot of things that had happened these last few months in Morrie's house. So I watched the therapist work on Morrie in the bed, pounding the back of his ribs, asking if he could feel the congestion loosening within him. And when she took a break, she asked if I wanted to try it. I said yes. Morrie, his face on the pillow, gave a little smile. Too hard, he said. I'm an old man. I drummed on his back and sides, moving around as she instructed. I hated the idea of Morrie's lying in bed under any circumstances, his last aphorism. When you're in bed, you're dead, rang in Mears, and curled on his side. He was so small, so withered, it was more a boy's body than a man's. I saw the paleness of his skin, the stray white hairs, the way his arms hung limp and helpless. I thought about how much time we spend trying to shape our bodies, lifting weights, crunching sit-ups, and in the end, nature takes it away from us anyhow. Beneath my fingers, I felt the loose flesh around Morris' bones, and I thumped him hard, as instructed. The truth is, I was pounding on his back when I wanted to be hitting the walls. Mitch, Morrie gasped, his voice jumpy as a jackhammer as I pounded on him. When did I give you a B? Morrie believed in the inherent good of people, but he also saw what they could become. People are only mean when they're threatened, he said later that day, and that's what our culture does. That's what our economy does. Even people who have jobs in our economy are threatened because they worry about losing them. And when you get threatened, you start looking out only for yourself. You start making money a god. It is all part of this culture, he exhaled. Which is why I don't buy into it. I nodded at him and squeezed his hand. We held hands regularly now. This was another change for me. Things that before would have made me embarrassed or squeamish were now routinely handled. The catheter bag, connected to the tube inside him and filled with greenish waste fluid, lay by my foot near the leg of his chair. A few months earlier, it might have disgusted me. It was inconsequential now. So was the smell of the room after Morrie had used the commode. He did not have the luxury of moving from place to place, of closing a bathroom door behind him, spraying some air freshener when he left. There was his bed, there was his chair, and that was his life. If my life were squeezed into such a thimble, I doubt I could make it smell any better. Here's what I mean by building your own little subculture, Morrie said. I don't mean you disregard every rule of your community. I don't go around naked, for example. I don't run through red lights. The little things I can obey. But the big things, how we think, what we value, those you must choose yourself. You can't let anyone or any society determine those for you. Take my condition. The things I am supposed to be embarrassed about now, not being able to walk, not being able to wipe my ass, waking up some mornings wanting to cry, there is nothing innately embarrassing or shamming about them. It's the same for women not being thin enough or men not being rich enough. It's just what our culture would have you believe. Don't believe it. I asked Morrie why he hadn't moved somewhere else when he was younger. Don't know. South America, New Guinea, someplace not as selfish as America. Every society has its own problems. Morrie said, lifting his eyebrows, the closest he could come to a shrug. The way to do it, I think, isn't to run away. You have to work at creating your own culture. Look, no matter where you live, the biggest defect we human beings have is our short-sightedness. We don't see what we could be. We should be looking at our potential, stretching ourselves into everything we can become. But if you're surrounded by people who say, I want mine now, you end up with a few people with everything and a military to keep the poor ones from rising up and stealing it. Morrie looked over my shoulder to the far window. Sometimes you could hear a passing truck or a whip of the wind. He gazed for a moment at his neighbors' houses, then continued. Problem, Mitch, is that we don't believe we are as much alike as we are. Whites and blacks, Catholics and Protestants, men and women. If we saw each other as more alike, we might be very eager to join in one big human family in this world, and to care about that family the way we care about our own. But believe me, when you are dying, you see it is true. We all have the same beginning birth, and we all have the same end death. So how different can we be? Invest in the human family. Invest in people. Build a little community of those you love and who love you. He squeezed my hand gently. I squeezed back harder. And like that carnival contest where you bang a hammer and watch the disc rise up the pole, I could almost see my body heat rise up Morrie's chest and neck into his cheeks and eyes. He smiled. In the beginning of life, when we are infants, we need others to survive, right? And at the end of life, when you get like me, you need others to survive, right? His voice dropped to a whisper. But here's the secret. In between, we need others as well. Later that afternoon, Connie and I went into the bedroom to watch the O.J. Simpson verdict. It was a tense scene as the principals all turned to face the jury, Simpson, in his blue suit, surrounded by his small army of lawyers, the prosecutors who wanted him behind bars just a few feet away. When the foreman read the verdict not guilty, Connie shrieked. Oh my God. We watched as Simpson hugged his lawyers. We listened as the commentators tried to explain what it all meant. We saw crowds of blacks celebrating in the streets outside the courthouse and crowds of whites sitting stunned inside restaurants. The decision was being hailed as momentous. Even though murders take place every day. Connie went out in the hall. She had seen enough. I heard the door to Morrie's study close. I stared at the TV set. Everyone in the world is watching this thing, I told myself. Then, from the other room, I heard the ruffling of Morrie's being lifted from his chair and I smiled. As the trial of the century reached its dramatic conclusion, my old professor was sitting on the toilet. It is 1979, a basketball game in the Brandeis gym. The team is doing well and the student section begins a chant. We're number one! We're number one! Morrie is sitting nearby. He is puzzled by the cheer. At one point in the midst of we're number one, he rises and yells, What's wrong with being number two? The students look at him. They stop chanting. He sits down, smiling and triumphant. The audio-visual, part 3. The Nightline crew came back for its third and final visit. The whole tenor of the thing was different now. Less like an interview, more like a sad farewell. Ted Capel had called several times before coming up and he had asked Morrie, Do you think you can handle it? Morrie wasn't sure he could. I'm tired all the time now, Ted, and I'm choking a lot. If I can't say something, will you say it for me? Capel said sure. And then the normally stoic anchor added this. If you don't want to do it, Morrie, it's okay. I'll come up and say goodbye anyhow. Later, Morrie would grin mischievously and say, I'm getting to him. And he was. Capel now referred to Morrie as a friend. My old professor had even coaxed compassion out of the television business. For the interview, which took place on a Friday afternoon, Morrie wore the same shirt he'd had on the day before. He changed shirts only every other day at this point, and this was not the other day, so why break routine unlike the previous two Capel-Schwartz sessions? This one was conducted entirely within Morrie's study, where Morrie had become a prisoner of his chair. Capel, who kissed my old professor when Heffer saw him, now had to squeeze in alongside the bookcase in order to be seen in the camera's lens. Before they started, Capel asked about the disease's progression. How bad is it, Morrie? Morrie weakly lifted a hand, halfway up his belly. This was as far as he could go. Capel had his answer. The camera rolled the third and final interview. Capel asked if Morrie was more afraid now that death was near. Morrie said no. To tell the truth, he was less afraid. He said he was letting go of some outside world, not having the newspaper read to him as much, not paying as much attention to mail, instead listening more to music and watching the leaves change color through his window. There were other people who suffered from ALS, Morrie knew, some of them famous, such as Stephen Hawking, the brilliant physicist and author of A Brief History of Time. He lived with a hole in his throat, spoke through a computer synthesizer, typed words by batting his eyes as a sensor picked up the movement. This was admirable, but it was not the way Morrie wanted to live. He told Capel he knew when it would be time to say goodbye. Me, Ted, living means I can be responsive to the other person. It means I can show my emotions and my feelings, talk to them, feel with them. Exhaled. When that is gone, Morrie is gone. They talked like friends. As he had in the previous two interviews, Capel asked about the old-ass wipe test, hoping perhaps for a humorous response. But Morrie was too tired even to grin. He shook his head. When I sit on the commode, I can no longer sit up straight. I'm listing all the time, so they have to hold me. When I'm done, they have to wipe me. That is how far it's gotten. He told Capel he wanted to die with serenity. He shared his latest aphorism. Don't let go too soon, but don't hang on too long. Capel nodded painfully. Only 6 months had passed between the first Nightline show and this one, but Morrie Schwartz was clearly a collapsed form. He had decayed before a national TV audience, ammonizaries of a death. But as his body rotted, his character shone even more brightly. Toward the end of the interview, the camera zoomed in on Morrie. Capel was not even in the picture. Only his voice was heard from outside it. And the anchor asked if my old professor had anything he wanted to say to the millions of people he had touched. Although he did not mean it this way, I couldn't help but think of a condemned man being asked for his final words. Be compassionate, Morrie whispered, and take responsibility for each other. If we only learned those lessons, this world would be so much better a place. He took a breath, then added his mantra, love each other or die. Interview was ended, but for some reason the cameraman left the film rolling and a final scene was caught on tape. You did a good job, Capel said. Morrie smiled weakly. I gave you what I had, he whispered. You always do. Ted, this disease is knocking at my spirit. But it will not get my spirit. It'll get my body. It will not get my spirit. Capel was near tears. You done good. You think so? Morrie rolled his eyes toward the ceiling. I'm bargaining with him up there now. I'm asking him, do I get to be one of the angels? It was the first time Morrie admitted talking to God. The 12th Tuesday we talk about forgiveness. Forgive yourself before you die. Then forgive others. This was a few days after the Nightline interview. The sky was rainy and dark, and Morrie was beneath a blanket. I sat at the far end of his chair, holding his bare feet. They were calloused and curled, and his toenails were yellow. I had a small jar of lotion, and I squeezed some into my hands and began to massage his ankles. It was another of the things I had watched his helpers do for months, and now, in an attempt to hold on to what I could of him, I had volunteered to do it myself. The disease had left Morrie without the ability even to wiggle his toes, yet he could still feel pain, and massages helped relieve it. Also, of course, Morrie liked being held and touched. And at this point, anything I could do to make him happy, I was going to do. Mitch, he said, returning to the subject of forgiveness. There is no point in keeping vengeance or stubbornness. These things, he sighed, these things I so regret in my life. Pride, vanity. Why do we do things we do? The importance of forgiving was my question. I had seen those movies where the patriarch of the family is on his deathbed, and he calls for his estranged son so that he can make peace before he goes. E wondered if Morrie had any of that inside him, a sudden need to say, "I'm sorry," before he died. Morrie nodded. "Do you see that sculpture?" He tilted his head toward a bust that sat high on a shelf against the far wall of his office. I had never really noticed it before. Cast in bronze, it was the face of Ammon in his early 40s, wearing a necktie, a tuft of hair falling across his forehead. "That's me," Morrie said. "A friend of mine sculpted that maybe 30 years ago. His name was Norman. We used to spend so much time together. We went swimming. We took rides to New York, he had me over to his house in Cambridge, and he sculpted that bust of me down in his basement. It took several weeks to do it, but he really wanted to get it right." I studied the face. How strange to see a three-dimensional Morrie, so healthy, so young, watching over us as we spoke. Even in bronze, he had a whimsical look, and I thought this friend had sculpted Alityl's spirit as well. "Well, here's the sad part of the story," Morrie said. "Norman and his wife moved away to Chicago. A little while later, my wife, Charlotte, had to have a pretty serious operation. Norman and his wife never get in touch with us. I know they knew about it. Charlotte and I were very hurt because they never called to see how she was, so we dropped the relationship. Over the years, I met Norman a few times and he always tried to reconcile, but I didn't accept it. I wasn't satisfied with his explanation. I was prideful. I shrugged him off." His voice choked. "Mitch, a few years ago. He died of cancer. I feel so sad. I never got to see him. I never got to forgive. It pains me now so much." Was crying again, a soft and quiet cry, and because his head was back, the tears rolled off the side of his face before they reached his lips. "Sorry," I said. "B," he whispered. "Tears are okay." I continued rubbing lotion into his lifeless toes. He wept for a few minutes, alone with his memories. "It's not just other people we need to forgive, Mitch," he finally whispered. "We also need to forgive yourselves. Ourselves. Yes, for all the things we didn't do, all the things we should have done. You can't get stuck on the regrets of what should have happened. That doesn't help you when you get to where I am. I always wished I had done more with my work. I wished I had written more books. I used to beat myself up over it. Now I see that never did any good. Make peace. You need to make peace with yourself and everyone around you." I leaned over and dabbed at the tears with a tissue. Morrie flicked his eyes open and closed. His breathing was audible like a light snore. "Forgive yourself, forgive others. Don't wait, Mitch. Not everyone gets the time I'm getting. Not everyone is as lucky." I tossed the tissue into the wastebasket and returned to his feet. Lucky, I pressed my thumb into his hardened flesh and he didn't even feel it. Tension of opposites, Mitch. Remember that? Things pulling in different directions. I remember. I mourn my dwindling time, but I cherish the chance it gives me to make things right. We sat there for a while, quietly, as the rain splattered against the windows. The hibiscus plant behind his head was still holding on, small but firm. "Mitch," Morrie whispered. I rolled his toes between my fingers, lost in the task. "Look at me." I glanced up and saw the most intense look in his eyes. "I don't know why you came back to me, but I want to say this." He paused and his voice choked. "If I could have had another son, I would have liked it to be you." I dropped my eyes, kneading the dying flesh of his feet between my fingers. For a moment I felt afraid, as if accepting his words would somehow betray my own father. But when I looked up, I saw Morrie smiling through tears, and I knew there was no betrayal in a moment like this. All I was afraid of was saying goodbye. "Picked a place to be buried." "Where is that?" "Not far from here. On a hill beneath a tree overlooking a pond. Very serene." "A good place to think. Are you planning on thinking there?" "I'm planning on being dead there." He chuckles, I chuckle. "Will you visit?" "Visit. Just come and talk. Make it a Tuesday. You always come on Tuesdays." "We're Tuesday people." "Right, Tuesday people. Come to talk then." He has grown so weak so fast. "Look at me," he says. I'm looking. "Come to my grave to tell me your problems." "My problems?" "Yes, and you'll give me answers." "I'll give you what I can, don't I always?" I picture his grave on the hill overlooking the pond, some little 9-foot piece of earth where they will place him, cover him with dirt, put a stone on top. Maybe in a few weeks, maybe in a few days. I see myself sitting there alone, arms across my knees, staring into space. "It won't be the same," I say, not being able to hear you talk. "Ah, talk." He closes his eyes and smiles. "Tell you what. After I'm dead, you talk, and I'll listen." 13th Tuesday, we talk about the perfect day Morrie wanted to be cremated. He had discussed it with Charlotte, and they decided it was the best way. The rabbi from Brandeis, Al Axelrad, longtime friend whom they chose to conduct the funeral service, had come to visit Morrie, and Morrie told him of his cremation plans. And Al, Yes. Make sure they don't overcook me. The rabbi was stunned. But Morrie was able to joke about his body now. The closer he got to the end, the more he saw it as a mere shell, a container of the soul. It was withering to useless skin and bones anyhow, which made it easier to let go. We are so afraid of the sight of death, Morrie told me when I sat down. I adjusted the microphone on his collar, but it kept flopping over. Morrie coughed. He was coughing all the time now. I read a book the other day. It said as soon as someone dies in a hospital, they pull the sheets up over their head and they wheel the body to some chute and push it down. They can't wait to get it out off their sight. People act as if death is contagious. I fumbled with the microphone. Morrie glanced at my hands. It's not contagious, you know. Death is as natural as life. It's part of the deal we made. He coughed again, and I moved back and waited, always braced for something serious. Morrie had been having bad nights lately. Frightening nights. He could sleep only a few hours at a time before violent hacking spells woke him. The nurses would come into the bedroom, pound him on the back, try to bring up the poison. Even if they got him breathing normally again, normally, meaning with the help off the oxygen machine, the fight left him fatigued the whole next day. The oxygen tube was up his nose now. I hated the sight of it. To me, it symbolized helplessness. I wanted to pull it out. Last night. Morrie said softly. Yes, last night. I had a terrible spell. It went on for hours, and I really wasn't sure I was going to make it. No breath, no end to the choking. At one point, I started to get dizzy. And then I felt a certain peace. I felt that I was ready to go. His eyes widened. Mitch, it was a most incredible feeling. The sensation of accepting what was happening, being at peace. I was thinking about a dream I had last week, where I was crossing a bridge into something unknown. Being ready to move on to whatever is next. But you didn't. Morrie waited a moment. He shook his head slightly. No, I didn't, but I felt that I could. Do you understand? That's what we're all looking for. A certain peace with the idea of dying. If we know in the end that we can ultimately have that peace with dying, then we can finally do the really hard thing, which is make peace with living. He asked to see the hibiscus plant on the ledge behind him. I cupped it in my hand and held it up near his eyes. He smiled. It's natural to die, he said again. The fact that we make such a big hullabaloo over it is all because we don't see ourselves as part of nature. We think because we're human, we're something above. Nature, he smiled at the plant. We're not. Everything that gets born dies. He looked at me. Do you accept that? Yes, all right, he whispered. Now here's the payoff. Here is how we are different from these wonderful plants and animals. As long as we can love each other and remember the feeling of love we had, we can die without ever really going away. All the love you created is still there. All the memories are still there. You live on in the hearts of everyone you have touched and nurtured while you were here. His voice was raspy, which usually meant he needed to stop for a while. I placed the plant back on the ledge and went to shut off the tape recorder. This is the last sentence Morrie got out before I did. Death ends a life, not a relationship. There had been a development in the treatment of ALS, an experimental drug that was just gaining passage. It was not a cure, but a delay, a slowing of the decay for perhaps a few months. Morrie had heard about it, but he was too far gone. Besides, the medicine wouldn't be available for several months. For me, Morrie said, dismissing it. In all the time he was sick, Morrie never held out hope he would be cured. He was realistic to a fault. One time, I asked if someone were to wave a magic wand and make him all better, would he become? In time, the man he had been before, he shook his head. No way I could go back. I am a different self now. I'm different in my attitudes. I'm different appreciating my body, which I didn't do fully before. I'm different in terms of trying to grapple with the big questions, the ultimate questions, the ones that won't go away. That's the thing, you see. Once you get your fingers on the important questions, you can't turn away from them. And which are the important questions? As I see it, they have to do with love, responsibility, spirituality, awareness. And if I were healthy today, those would still be my issues. They should have been all along. I tried to imagine Morrie healthy. I tried to imagine him pulling the covers from his body, stepping from that chair, the two of us going for a walk around the neighborhood, the way we used to walk around campus. I suddenly realized it had been 16 years since I'd seen him standing up. 16 years. What if you had one day perfectly healthy, I asked. What would you do? 24 hours. 24 hours. Let's see. I'd get up in the morning, do my exercises, have a lovely breakfast of sweet rolls and tea, go for a swim, then have my friends come over for a nice lunch. I'd have them come one or two at a time so we could talk about their families, their issues, talk about how much we mean to each other. Then I'd like to go for a walk, in a garden with some trees, watch their colors, watch the birds, take in the nature that I haven't seen in so long now. In the evening, we'd all go together to a restaurant with some great pasta, maybe some duck I love duck, and then we'd dance the rest of the night. I'd dance with all the wonderful dance partners out there until I was exhausted. And then I'd go home and have a deep, wonderful sleep. That's it. That's it. It was so simple. So average. I was actually a little disappointed. I figured he'd fly to Italy or have lunch with the president or romp on the seashore or try every exotic thing he could think of. After all the 7 months, lying there, unable to move a leg or a foot, how could he find perfection in such an average day? Then I realized this was the whole point. Before I left that day, Morrie asked if he could bring up a topic. "Your brother," he said. I felt a shiver. I do not know how Morrie knew this was on my mind. I had been trying to call my brother in Spain for weeks and had learned from a friend of his that he was flying back and forth to a hospital in Amsterdam. "Mitch, I know it hurts when you can't be with someone you love, but you need to be at peace with his desires. Maybe he doesn't want you interrupting your life. Maybe he can't deal with that burden. I tell everyone I know to carry on with the life they know, don't ruin it because I am dying." "But he's my brother," I said. "I know," Morrie said. "That's why it hurts." I saw Peter in my mind when he was 8 years old, his curly blonde hair puffed into a sweaty ball atop his head. I saw us wrestling in the yard next to our house, the grass stains soaking through the knees off our jeans. I saw him singing songs in front of the mirror, holding a brush as a microphone, and I saw us squeezing into the attic where we hid together as children, testing our parents' will to find us for dinner. And then I saw him as the adult who had drifted away, thin and frail, his face bony from the chemotherapy treatments. "Morrie," I said. "Why doesn't he want to see me?" My old professor sighed. "There is no formula to relationships. They have to be negotiated in loving ways, with room for both parties, what they want and what they need, what they can do and what their life is like. In business, people negotiate to win. They negotiate to get what they want. Maybe you're too used to that. Love is different. Love is when you are as concerned about someone else's situation as you are about your own. Had these special times with your brother and you no longer have what you had with him. You want them back. You never want them to stop. But that's part of being human. Stop, renew, stop, renew." I looked at him. I saw all the death in the world. I felt helpless. "Find a way back to your brother," Morrie said. "How do you know?" Morrie smiled. "You found me, didn't you?" "I heard a nice little story the other day," Morrie says. He closes his eyes for a moment and I wait. "'Kay, the story is about a little wave bobbing along in the ocean, having a grand old time. He's enjoying the wind and the fresh air until he notices the other waves in front of him crashing against the shore. 'My God, this is terrible,' the wave says. 'Look what's going to happen to me.' Then along comes another wave. It sees the first wave looking grim and it says to him, 'Why do you look so sad?' The first wave says, 'You don't understand. We're all going to crash. All of us waves are going to be nothing. Isn't it terrible?' The second wave says, 'No, you don't understand. You're not a wave. You're part of the ocean.' I smile. Morrie closes his eyes again. 'Part of the ocean,' he says, 'part of the ocean.' I watch him breathe, in and out, in and out. The 14th Tuesday, we say goodbye. It was cold and damp as I walked up the steps to Morrie's house. I took in little details, things I hadn't noticed for all the times I'd visited. The cut of the hill, the stone facade of the house, the pachysandra plants, the low shrubs. I walked slowly, taking my time, stepping on dead, wet leaves that flattened beneath my feet. Charlotte had called the day before to tell me Morrie was not doing well. This was her way of saying the final days had arrived. Morrie had canceled all of his appointments and had been sleeping much off the time, which was unlike him. He never cared for sleeping, not when there were people he could talk with. "He wants you to come visit," Charlotte said. "But Mitch," "Yes, he's very weak." Porch steps, the glass in the front door. I absorbed these things in a slow, observant manner as if seeing them for the first time. I felt the tape recorder in the bag on my shoulder and I unzipped it to make sure I had tapes. I don't know why, I always had tapes. Connie answered the bell. Normally buoyant, she had a drawn look on her face. Her hello was softly spoken. "How's he doing?" I said. "So good." She bit her lower lip. "I don't like to think about it. He's such a sweet man, you know." I knew. This is such a shame. Charlotte came down the hall and hugged me. She said that Morrie was still sleeping. Even though it was 10 a.m., we went into the kitchen. I helped her straighten up, noticing all the bottles of pills lined upon the table, a small army of brown plastic soldiers with white caps. My old professor was taking morphine now to ease his breathing. I put the food I had brought with me into the refrigerator: soup, vegetable cakes, tuna salad. I apologized to Charlotte for bringing it. Morrie hadn't chewed food like this in months. We both knew that, but it had become a small tradition. Sometimes, when you're losing someone, you hang on to whatever tradition you can. I waited in the living room where Morrie and Ted Capel had done their first interview. I read the newspaper that was lying on the table. 2 Minnesota children had shot each other playing with their father's guns. A baby had been found buried in a garbage can in an alley in Los Angeles. I put down the paper and stared into the empty fireplace. I tapped my shoe lightly on the hardwood floor. Eventually, I heard a door open and close, then Charlotte's footsteps coming toward me. "All right," she said softly. "He's ready for you." I rose and I turned toward our familiar spot, then saw a strange woman sitting at the end of the hall in a folding chair, her eyes on a book, her legs crossed. This was a hospice nurse, part of the 24-hour watch. Morrie's study was empty. I was confused. Then I turned back hesitantly to the bedroom, and there he was, lying in bed under the sheet. I had seen him like this only one other time, when he was getting massaged, and the echo of his aphorism, "When you're in bed, you're dead," began anew inside my head. I entered, pushing a smile onto my face. He wore a yellow pajama-like top, and a blanket covered him from the chest down. The lump of his form was so withered that I almost thought there was something missing. He was as small as a child. Morrie's mouth was open, and his skin was pale and tight against his cheekbones. When his eyes rolled toward me, he tried to speak, but I heard only a soft grunt. "There he is," I said, mustering all the excitement I could find in my empty till he exhaled, shut his eyes, then smiled, the very effort seeming to tire him. "My dear friend," he finally said. "I am your friend," I said. "Not so good today. Tomorrow will be better." He pushed out another breath and forced a nod. He was struggling with something beneath the sheets, and I realized he was trying to move his hands toward the opening. "Hold," he said. I pulled the covers down and grasped his fingers. They disappeared inside my own. I leaned in close, a few inches from his face. It was the first time I had seen him unshaven, the small white whiskers looking so out of place, as if someone had shaken salt neatly across his cheeks and chin. "How could there be new life in his beard when it was draining everywhere else, Morrie?" I said softly. "Coach," he corrected. "Coach," I said. I felt a shiver. He spoke in short bursts, inhaling air, exhaling words. His voice was thin and raspy. He smelled of ointment. "You are a good soul." A good soul touched me. He whispered. He moved my hands to his heart. "Here." It felt as if I had a pit in my throat. "Coach. I don't know how to say goodbye." He patted my hand weakly, keeping it on his chest. "This is how we say goodbye." Breathed softly in and out, I could feel his ribcage rise and fall. Then he looked right at me. "Loves you," he rasped. "I love you too, Coach." "No, you do." "No, something else." "What else do you know?" "You always have." Eyes got small, and then he cried, his face contorting like a baby who hasn't figured how his tear ducts work. I held him close for several minutes. I rubbed his loose skin. I stroked his hair. I put a palm against his face and felt the bones close to the flesh and the tiny wet tears as if squeezed from a dropper. When his breathing approached normal again, I cleared my throat and said I knew he was tired, so I would be back next Tuesday, and I expected him to be a little more alert. "Thank you." He snorted lightly, as close as he could come to a laugh. It was a sad sound just the same. I picked up the unopened bag with the tape recorder. Why had I even brought this? I knew we would never use it. I leaned in and kissed him closely, my face against his, whiskers on whiskers, skin on skin, holding it there longer than normal, in case it gave him even a split second of pleasure. "Okay, then," I said, pulling away. I blinked back the tears, and he smacked his lips together and raised his eyebrows at the sight of my face. I like to think it was a fleeting moment of satisfaction for my dear old professor. He had finally made me cry. "Okay, then," he whispered. Graduation, Morrie died on a Saturday morning. His immediate family was with him in the house. Rob made it in from Tokyo. He got to kiss his father goodbye, and John was there. And of course Charlotte was there, and Charlotte's cousin Marcia, who had written the poem that so moved Morrie at his unofficial memorial service, the poem that likened him to a tender sequoia. They slept in shifts around his bed. Morrie had fallen into a coma 2 days after our final visit, and the doctor said he could go at any moment. Instead, he hung on, through a tough afternoon, through a dark night. Finally, on the 4th of November, when those he loved had left the room just for a moment to grab coffee in the kitchen, The first time none of them were with him since the coma began. Morrie stopped breathing. And he was gone. I believe he died this way on purpose. I believe he wanted no chilling moments, no one to witness his last breath and be haunted by it, the way he had been haunted by his mother's death notice telegram or by his father's corpse in the city morgue. I believe he knew that he was in his own bed, that his books and his notes and his small hibiscus plant were nearby. He wanted to go serenely, and that is how he went. The funeral was held on a damp, windy morning. The grass was wet, and the sky was the color of milk. We stood by the hole in the earth, close enough to hear the pond water lapping against the edge and to see ducks shaking off their feathers. Although hundreds of people had wanted to attend, Charlotte kept this gathering small, just a few close friends and relatives. Rabbi Axelrod read a few poems. Morrie's brother, David, who still walked with a limp from his childhood polio, lifted the shovel and tossed dirt in the grave, as per tradition. At one point, when Morrie's ashes were placed into the ground, I glanced around the cemetery. Morrie was right. It was indeed a lovely spot, trees and grass and a sloping hill. "You talk, I'll listen," he had said. I tried doing that in my head and, to my happiness, found that the imagined conversation felt almost natural. I looked down at my hands, saw my watch, and realized why. It was Tuesday. My father moved through days of we, singing each new leaf out of each tree, and every child was sure that spring danced when she heard my father sing. Poem Byeecummings, read Bymorrie's son, Rob, at the memorial service conclusion. I look back sometimes at the person I was before I rediscovered my old professor. I want to talk to that person. I want to tell him what to look out for, what mistakes to avoid. I want to tell him to be more open, to ignore the lure of advertised values, to pay attention when your loved ones are speaking, as if it were the last time you might hear them. Mostly, I want to tell that person to get on an airplane and visit a gentle old man in West Newton, Massachusetts, sooner rather than later, before that old man gets sick and loses his ability to dance. I know I cannot do this. None of us can undo what we've done or relive a life already recorded. But if Professor Morris Schwartz taught me anything at all, it was this: there is no such thing as too late in life. He was changing until the day he said goodbye. Not long after Morrie's death, I reached my brother in Spain. We had a long talk. I told him I respected his distance, and that all I wanted was to be in touch in the present, not just the past, to hold him in my life as much as he could let me. "My only brother," I said. "I don't want to lose you, I love you." I had never said such a thing to him before. A few days later, I received a message on my fax machine. It was typed in the sprawling, poorly punctuated, all-cap letters fashion that always characterized my brother's words. "I've joined the 90s, it began. He wrote a few little stories, what he'd been doing that week, a couple of jokes. At the end, he signed off this way: "I have heartburn and diarrhea the moment life's a bitch." "Chat later," signed Sore Tush. I laughed until there were tears in my eyes. This book was largely Morrie's idea. He called it our final thesis. Like the best of work projects, it brought us closer together, and Morrie was delighted when several publishers expressed interest, even though he died before meeting any of them. The advance money helped pay Morrie's enormous medical bills, and for that we were both grateful. The title, by the way, we came up with one day in Morrie's office. He liked nomming things. He had several ideas, but when I said, "How about Tuesdays with Morrie?" he smiled in an almost blushing way, and I knew that was it. After Morrie died, I went through boxes of old college material, and I discovered a final paper I had written for one of his classes. It was 20 years old now. On the front page were my penciled comments scribbled to Morrie, and beneath them were his comments scribbled back. Mine began, "Dear Coach." His began, "Dear Player." For some reason, each time I read that, I miss him more. Have you ever really had a teacher? One who saw you as a raw but precious thing, a jewel that, with wisdom, could be polished to a proud shine. If you are lucky enough to find your way to such teachers, you will always find your way back. Sometimes it is only in your head. Sometimes it is right alongside their beds. The last class of my old professor's life took place once a week in his home, by a window in his study where he could watch a small hibiscus plant shed its pink flowers. The class met on Tuesdays. No books were required. The subject was the meaning of life. It was taught from experience. The teaching goes on.